So today we're going to start a new series on grief. What is grief and what can we do with it? What are the types of grief and how is it expressed in a dysfunctional family? I'm talking to Jackie Levy, an expert on grief. She's a psychologist, a grief coach. Um, she is associated with Tender Hearts, which is the Los Angeles David Kessler organization, as a moderator in support groups for grief. And she's a love care coach. So today we're starting our new series. How are you doing, Jackie?
Very excitedly about talking about the something that I am passionate about.
Yeah. And I have a lot of experience with grief too, but only from experiencing it firsthand. But it does give you a lot of insight.
No question about it. Truthfully, for me, this whole trajectory started from my own grief.
Mm-hmm.
My own grief and my own curiosity about what is this that I'm feeling and how is it related to what is happening.
Mm-hmm. So I heard one of the most, or read one of the most interesting quotes about what grief is, and I just wanted to read it. Grief is love trying to find a place to go when the person or thing we loved is gone.
I love it because I think that the moment you were going to ask me what is grief, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Grief is an expression of love that is looking a way to express itself uh, when what we have lost is lost.
I wanted to talk just a little bit about what grief is. And if you can expound on that, because there are many types of grief. And one of the types we're going to be talking about with the dysfunctional family is, when that grief is disenfranchised. So let's talk about the different types of grief.
Well, grief is love for something that we have lost.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time we talk about humans that we have lost, but there is so much that we have lost. When I work with grief, it can be grief for a spouse, a
Mm-hmm.
partner, a child, grief that comes as a result of suicide, love as it comes as a result of misuse of drugs. It can be a crime. Can be by murder. There are so many types of grief, and of course, there is also the loss of a job and the loss of a house and the loss of everything has grief. And I
Right.
am also very passionate about the grief that comes as a loss of a pet because I
Mm-hmm.
have suffered that many times. And grief is grief. Losing a pet
Yeah.
is humongous.
Yeah. And I'm sure that when you're expressing grief for a pet, that it's attached to a lot of other grief, that perhaps has been buried.
It is interesting that you're saying that because love for a pet is also the love that you could not give or you could not receive.
Mm.
So you use a pet as that entity or that being that is capable of receiving and giving what
Mm-hmm.
you yearn so much for.
Mm-hmm.
So a pet is more than a four-legged or two-legged furry thing. A pet is an expression of everything that you wish was.
Filling a void.
Absolutely.
of some sort. And, you know, especially in a dysfunctional family, a pet gives you unconditional love, which is what a parent is supposed to do. And if you're not getting that from a parent, then, you know, a pet is extremely important to fill
Yeah,
that void for a child.
no question about it. When I see people that come to me for pet grief, um, the suffering, the pain is incredible. It is, many people say it is bigger than when I lost such and such. Many people say I'm crying more for my dog or my cat than I cried for my parents.
Hmm.
And at the beginning of my journey, I was a little bit a little bit shocked when I heard that. And then I started to explore a little bit more of that with my own pets.
Hmm.
And I realized that losing a pet is losing part of your own intimate self.
Say that again.
Losing a pet is losing a little bit of your own intimate self.
And
Because
when you say intimate self, what does that mean?
a pet is the one that really knows you.
Hmm.
The pet is the one that has that language that is not spoken, but a pet will know exactly where you are in your life at certain points, and a
So,
pet makes sure that you're okay.
so a pet gives you, not gives you, a pet adapts without question your love language, really.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
And another thing about a pet is that it is unconditional. A pet
right.
will love you no matter what you do to him, to it. Uh, you can be incredibly angry at the pet, and the pet knows that you're angry. And
Hmm.
next time the pet sees you, you're the best thing that ever happened to the pet.
Right. They don't remember the
No,
anger.
no, and they take it as part of part of the
Hmm.
emotions and feelings that are happening at a certain point. But when I see you again, you are the perfect
Right.
person.
You're starting from the beginning again, a
Absolutely.
clean slate. That would be nice with people, wouldn't it?
It would.
So, one of the types of grief is anticipatory grief. And that's something that caregivers really experience a lot
Yeah.
because the person that their loved one who they're caring for is not necessarily dying, they're aging, and their death could be way in the future, but they're still declining and suffering. And you're watching that process, and you don't always accept it, you know, as a fact of life. And so that lack of acceptance is um really causes a lot of problems. You know, it causes a lot of cognitive dissonance that actually stops you from doing the things that they really need.
It is, using the word cognitive dissonance is a good one,
Mhm.
because you start that grief, the anticipatory grief, because you know that something is happening. You know it at a
Right.
different level.
Hmm.
So that is where you start acting in a certain way, and many times you don't know why you're acting in a certain way. And that is the cognitive dissonance, because
Right.
you definitely know that something is happening and something might happen. You're already starting to prepare, and you're already in grief. Anticipatory grief is really very difficult because it is the grief of
Really
not
is.
knowing, and
Mhm.
it is already the grief of the loss, because you are already losing a definition of who you are in relationship to the person or the pet that is about
Mhm.
to go.
Yeah. And one of the major coping mechanisms is denial. And so that denial it just interferes so much, you know, and on so many levels.
I can tell you a little bit about the anticipatory grief with my pet that I lost
Hmm.
only 6 weeks ago. which is very interesting what happened, the switch of my relationship with, his name was Oscar, when I was told April 11th that Oscar was going to die in a couple of days.
Mhm.
Of course, I went into the spiral of that comes from the news. From that moment on, my relationship with Oscar changed totally. It was like, okay, Oscar is right now in hospice, and
Mhm.
we will do everything that is possible to do so that he will not suffer.
Mhm.
And it is so interesting how that went, because at that point, I didn't care if he got more medication or not. I didn't care if he ate or not. What I cared is that he felt loved.
Mhm.
He went on to live for 11 weeks, and those 11 weeks were a love story.
Mhm.
I loved Oscar from the very beginning, and he loved me. But those 11 weeks, where I had no expectations, where I knew that he could die any moment, I stopped being the boss. It was
Mhm.
what was the most important part of that relationship was the love that was
Mhm.
between the two of us.
Mhm.
And he was so grateful. You
Mhm.
could see how grateful he was. He was ready to do anything to make me happy while really, really dying. And I could see that he was grateful that I was not expecting anything from him and that I was not forcing any medication on him. And if he decided not to eat, the only thing that I was really forcing on him was water.
Mhm.
So I would not leave his plate in the regular place. I would come to him and say, "You need to drink." And he was so grateful that he drank.
That's one of the huge things about dogs is in the difference between dogs and people is that the dogs have no expectations. People have a lot of expectations.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that you said, it's very interesting that, and we talk a lot about that, in our work. But when you focus on love and everything else goes away, the most important thing, that rises to the top is love. And focusing on that um, changes everything. It
I
goes
would
from
agree with that.
stress and worry to how can I make them comfortable?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is very important. And going back to my beginning of grief, uh, when I was about to lose my grandfather, which is the beginning of my work with the grief, we had, after we wouldn't allow him to go because we needed him so much, he was like the pillar of the family.
Hmm.
Eventually, one of my cousins, who was also a grandchild of my grandfather, brought a doula, which I had never heard of, to help my grandfather die, but also to help the family deal with what was happening
Hmm.
and allow my grandfather to go. We were just holding on to him because we thought that the moment he would go, the whole family would collapse.
Hmm.
And what happened with this doula is that um, he brought the family together in such a way that when my grandfather actually died, the love that there was around him stayed with all of us.
Hmm.
And we
Hmm.
survived. We survived, and the love that we had for my grandfather was still there. It was called grief, and we could grieve together. It is so interesting. I then realized also that it takes a village to bring up children. I think it takes a village to allow people to go.
Hmm.
And that is the beauty of family or community or having people like tender hearts where you can go and just grieve.
Mhm.
You know.
We talked about the magic that comes with choosing to take responsibility when called on. What first seemed like perhaps an enormous burden ends up teaching us about ourselves and offering us the opportunity to grow and change. In fact, what we thought was a burden may turn out to be the doorway to our own freedom.
You know, one of the types of grief is what they call prolonged grief, which happens when there's a trauma. You know, it could have been violence, or it could have been, anything, an unresolved relationship, but something that makes the grief get stuck. And trauma, and um, that state of things being unresolved and no way to resolve them, um, is really something that you can do something about. If you are depending on circumstances, to resolve your grief, then you're really looking in the wrong place. You have to find that resolution within yourself.
If we have the awareness that we cannot change a situation and that we have the tools to change ourselves, that is precious.
It's a very personal process. And it's a process that, especially if there's a trauma, that you can learn a lot and maybe even discover new meaning. So much of what people do in life, when they really find out what their purpose is in life and what they want to do for a career, is it has to do with some wound. It has to do with some trauma that they've experienced, and that they have this unique ability and this unique perspective on it. And it allows them to help other people in the same situation. So it depends on what you do with grief.
Well, it is beautiful that you're bringing that up. And the grief takes many shapes and forms. There is no, there has been a lot of talk about the stages of grief.
Mm.
I believe that all stages are present at all times. They just come to the surface in a different way. Sometimes I like to equate grief to the ocean, and the waves that sometimes you think, oh, I'm done. I'm perfectly all right. And all of a sudden it comes with,
A wave.
So one of the things with trauma is a little bit like that. And what you said about finding meaning, I think one of the ways to heal is allowing yourself to feel. You can only heal if you can feel.
Mhm.
And once you get there, you can also start to say, okay, there was this loss, there is this pain. What am I going to do with it that will be meaningful?
Right.
There are many examples of that. The parents of
Yes.
of Matthew Shepard started an organization to deal with the gay people and how to protect them. The mother of a drunk driver started MAD.
Brene Brown said, "One day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will become someone else's survival guide. That's what happened to me. Explore how to use your grief to find new meaning and purpose." While caregiving is one of the most important times in life, it can also be one of the most challenging. Your worlds are colliding. Who you were as an adult and how you grew up may be very different. However, the past holds many secrets, some of which you may have been working around your whole life. Take the Challenges and Opportunities course. And if you need more support, talk to Jackie. You can find her at caregivingoutloud.com. Just look for the coach button.
These are all things that are totally part of finding meaning in the death. David Kessler started the Tender Hearts when he
Mm-hmm.
lost his son.
Mm-hmm.
These are all expressions. Some are humongous and some are not. It is what is meaningful to you. Finding meaning in a certain way. This is what I'm doing. I'm finding meaning in the loss of my parents, um, and
You
finding
know,
meaning in a beautiful way.
it's I have a kind of I have a word for it, and a lot of people, what happens is they just try to get busy. You know, they try to get busy, or they try to numb the pain instead of sit with it. And it's so important to sit with it, because I call it standing in the void, you know, because when you lose someone or something, there's this big gaping hole. There's this
Yeah.
void that needs to be filled, and people want to fill it, you know, as fast as they can. And when they sit with it, it's really one of the most creative times in your life. And you can't really manufacture it. You can't say, okay, I'm going to create a loss and have a void so that I can get my creative juices
Yeah.
going. You really, it's an opportunity, and you shouldn't waste it on just being sad or trying to numb your way out of it.
You know, it is very normal to try to start doing lots of things in order not to deal with it.
Mhm.
But as I said earlier, I think that you need to feel in order to heal. And healing doesn't mean that you have forgotten what is happening. It only means that you are learning how to live with that void. Now,
Right.
we say that not all loss has trauma, but all trauma has loss.
Mhm.
So, in terms of trauma, I think yes, there is an interaction in between being alone, the need to be alone to process,
Mhm.
but there is also that need to be in community and being
Mhm.
witnessed in your pain. I think the
Mhm.
witnessing is one of the most important things that you can do to support somebody that is in pain.
I believe that so much. I wrote a blog called Witness,
Mhm.
and it was about a woman who um, did that for me, you know, when my father died.
Mhm.
And I just talked and talked, and I didn't need or want for her to fix anything. I didn't want to even have a conversation, really. I just wanted to be able to voice, you know, what was inside. And that's where so much of um, where the book came from. You know, I started writing, and being a witness is it's huge. It's huge to have somebody that does that for you. That's such a gift.
It is a gift, and this is what we're doing. What we're doing is coming out with it is very clear there is nothing we can fix. We
Hmm.
cannot fix it. The loss is loss,
Hmm.
but we can witness your pain. We
Yeah,
can witness where you are. And by witnessing, you are able to probably start finding the meaning that you're going to give to that.
hmm,
And love care, I think, has come out of finding meaning. This is a way that you have found to find meaning.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because of my father with Alzheimer's. Um, so we're going to talk about dysfunctional families in another part of the series, but another type of grief is the disenfranchised grief, and that um, is really grief that's not recognized or validated or supported. And, it's very, I mean, you find it in dysfunctional families, and children of dysfunctional families have no voice to begin with. So when they are experiencing grief, they're really alone. They have no one to share it with, and they have no voice for it. And if there is a child who is experiencing anticipatory grief in a dysfunctional family, it's really compounded because there's no one to talk to about what's happening. In fact, if you were born at the time that we were, you really didn't talk about that at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
You never talked about death. You never talked about what was going on at home. And so really difficult time, for kids who have a parent who is ill and with cancer, or my mother had cancer, and she was in the house for about 5.5 years, bedridden. So, and there's grief, but there's no voice for it
There is
for a
grief and there is
child.
a lot of fear. For a child to witness that,
Mm-hmm.
there is so much fear because you don't know what is going to happen, and you become,
Right.
the roles are reversed. And as a child, you are not equipped to be the mother of your mother. That
Right.
is
You feel
not what you
very
should be.
unsafe.
Very unsafe. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that is so important nowadays, and with a program like your program, it is doing exactly that, bringing to awareness in people how important it is to talk about this, not to run away from it, to
Mm-hmm.
talk, to confront it, and to witness.
Right.
Yeah. And
And
to support,
and
it is very important to be supportive. So this is what we do. We support people through their grief.
in other countries other than the States, it seems like to me that dying is treated more as a natural part of life. People um, they don't go into this deep sense of grief. They're sad, but it's not a and so much of the time, like, the grandparent would be living with the family until they pass, and people see it as a natural part of life, and they talk about it way more freely.
It is cultural. Cultures have their rights
Mm-hmm.
that surround death. No, there is no question that every culture has a right about it. It is ceremonial,
Mm-hmm.
and what you do with the grief is very different. I mean, there are cultures that really accompany the dead, the person that is going to die to their death.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no question that it is an important part of a culture.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. We should make that part of our series, talking about the different cultural rights, and how that plays out in different cultures. So another type of grief is called masked grief, and it's when grief is expressed in really inappropriate ways, like anger. A lot of time, and that happens a lot of times when a spouse dies versus a parent. Sometimes with a parent, if you did not have a good relationship with the parent, it could be expressed that way. And a lot of times with a spouse, and you're left feeling alone.
Well, it is
And
an
especially,
expression, yeah, it is an expression of abandonment. So,
right. Well, especially if your spouse has died in some sort of unexpected way, with a crime or something like that. So grief comes out in anger, in risky behaviors, overeating, overworking, taking too many prescription drugs. Um, in this issue, the blog is about prescription drugs and
and the misuse of them.
right, exactly. So it's sort of they're skipping that really important part of healing.
I think that you don't skip anything. The only thing is that the timeline is a little bit different.
Right.
I think there is always grief. And because this is a trauma, it is traumatized grief. So it has also components of trauma, of healing trauma.
Yes.
Grief is not a one axis kind of thing, Grief is very, very complicated. So in grief, you also find it is not only the loss of the person, but it is also the loss of your own role in relationship to the person.
Right. Who am I now?
Exactly. So
without this person.
So in the who am I right now, it takes time to redefine who you are. In the loss of a spouse, who are you now that you are not a spouse?
But that brings a bigger question to the table when you start asking what I call meaning of life questions, and when you say, who am I now? It really brings up the question, who am I? Period. And you start looking at, who am I? What am I doing here? And you start looking at your life in a more serious way, especially if you are in your 50s or so, and you are saying, well, maybe I want to do something else with my life than sell cars, or do banking or be a lawyer. Maybe you want to do something in your life that has more meaning, where you're not so focused on money as you are focused on making a difference.
So when you are in your 50s, as you said, this is a time of life where you're starting your probably a little bit of the anticipatory grief for your own self. In the advertisements, it is over the hill and things like that. So that is when you're starting to feel that there is a future that is limited. So at that point, it is, the working curve might go into, okay, I worked, I did everything for money, or I did everything for whatever, and now it is time to do things for me. Okay, so it can be accelerated by the death of somebody, where you say, oh, time is really limited. Life is really limited.
Right.
How much do I have time to do what I really want to do in my life?
Well, also back to that word, expectations, because so many people, they live out their life trying to meet those expectations from parents, that they got when they were a child. And when you get to your 50s and some trauma happens and you're going through that grieving process and you're asking all those questions, then you really it's an important time to be able to pivot in your life.
Yeah.
And you pivot a lot of times because you say, hey, I've been doing this. It doesn't make me happy. I did it because my father always wanted me to be a lawyer like him, or,
Yeah.
whatever that is. And
So,
so you go through a
know,
trauma, you get to choose again.
yeah. So in that case, death can be a catalyst
Right.
to finding meaning in your life.
Right.
So, you know what? That is one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated with death and grief. What people do with that, it is incredible. It is incredible what can come from grief. I'm not going to go and look for somebody to die to start living my life. However, when that happens, it is an opportunity to also go inside, not only to say, who am I, but really to start deglossing the things that you didn't know about yourself. What are you capable of? And when you're caregiving, that's another opportunity of you to be able to say, oh, I'm actually compassionate. Oh, I actually can do this and this and that you had no idea that you could. I have met people that say, my father is dying, and I now know that I can do nothing for him. Or I have found people that have said, my father is dying, and I'm ready to do everything to make him happy. So, it is interesting how personal that is and how introspective that is as well.
That's why it's so tragic when people try to skip over it. And like you say, you never skip over it. But when they try to get busy and they try to, fill the void in some other way, in a lot of times unhealthy way. Another type of grief is delayed grief. And this comes because, if you've got some big event coming up in your life, or you're just incredibly busy at work, or any number of things, maybe you're having a baby, whatever. And you really just don't have time to let down and give yourself that break so that you can grieve. And so it's postponed. It's delayed. And when it's delayed, it has a much different effect. You don't skip it. You feel it.
You cannot skip it.
Right.
Going back to when once upon a time, when you didn't talk about grief in the family, it comes to haunt you later on in life. You cannot skip it.
Right. And it can even cause you to shut down emotionally without you even realizing it. It's like whether you want to or not. And it forces you to.
What happens then is you were not allowed to express the grief. Your
Right.
feelings were not they were not acceptable. They were not recognized. They were not acknowledged. So there are many things that can happen as a result of that. And one of them is that you decide that you are not feeling, and you really put a veil on your feelings.
More than once.
And that will come to haunt you.
More than once. I have, people say the universe is talking to you or whatever, but, if I need to slow down, I don't mean lately, but just in my life, something would always happen that made me slow down. If I didn't do it on my own, then something would happen.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And you are not always conscious about what happened, but it is like, all of a sudden you fall down and you say, oh, I need to take care of myself.
Yeah. There's also cumulative grief. And that's when several things are happening,
oh, yeah.
One after the other. And that's a tough one.
It is a tough one, and what we have learned, not only it is a tough one, it is a huge one,
Mhm.
and we have learned that you take one at a time. You know,
Mhm.
it is very difficult to say, I lost all of them. It is easier
Right.
to say, I'm going to deal with my mother now,
In the
then I'll
same
deal with
bucket.
my father, then I'll deal.
Mhm.
It is easier to do it that way, and it also, you know, the void comes also in batches like that. It is like, oh, I wish my mother was here to see what I'm
Mhm.
doing
Mhm.
with my life, or I wish my father was here to whatever. So it starts coming in once.
Yeah. But you don't know. I mean, people conflate grief when that happens, and they don't really know how to handle it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is one of the parts of grief. It is a loss that is intolerable. It is
Right.
so painful.
So, of course, there's communal grief when there's a tragedy,
Hmm.
like a flood or a
Hmm.
fire or something. And, sometimes I think with a huge tragedy, there's actually more capacity to connect and to people always talk about focusing on what's important in life. It was just a house, it was just a
Yeah,
car. And they instantly start to look at what is important. And it's their community, it's the people that lived, it's the people that they love. It's not the things.
you know, recently I was exposed to one of the hurricanes and
Hmm.
the humongous loss that happened in that community,
Right. In
and
North Carolina.
I'm always in awe of how this
Yeah.
community has come together, and people that never thought that they had anything to do with the community are totally donating their efforts, their community feelings there to rebuild the community. And there is a lot of grief because there are still people that are unaccounted for, there are still people that are missing, there are still their own loved ones. But how these communities come together, and all of a sudden you discover talents in every single person in the community. I can
Hmm.
do something that you didn't know that I can do. You know, I can.
Because they're focused on what they can do instead of what's
Mhm.
wrong, instead of everything that they lost. That's that's what is such a miracle.
You know, people that didn't know that they could cook
Yeah.
were the community kitchen for the beginning of the tragedy. People that they didn't know that they could transport people were the ones that were transporting people from place to place. The donations, people that had the uh, RVs donated
Hmm.
that as housing for whoever needed housing. I mean, it is incredible. It is incredible that what came out of that.
Yeah,
And the
you have some
compassion.
incredible stories
Yeah. I
that you
mean,
experienced.
the compassion that all of a sudden you feel in people that you thought that they didn't have feelings, or people that you thought that
Hmm.
they didn't care about one another, all of a sudden they
Hmm.
care about everybody, they know about everybody, and they will
Hmm.
tell you stories that are incredible.
Why don't you tell us one of your favorite stories about that experience?
Well, one of the families that was lucky enough to have a generator, it is a family that also had canned goods forever. They had a basement full of canned goods.
Hmm.
When this happened, they were the only ones that had some electricity in their house, and they had food. And they started feeding the whole people, everybody that lived in the surroundings came to their house every single day for dinner. And then they realized that they could also prepare lunch for children, or that they could start teaching children, making how do you call it, makeshift schools and classrooms and things like
Hmm.
that. and everybody became the parent of every child, so that the parents could actually do something like that. It started to be communal living. Like somebody could take care of all the children, while somebody could take care of going to the grocery store because they had a car or a tractor that could go through the fields because there were no streets. The streets were washed away.
Mhm.
So they could go to the grocery store. It is incredible the amount of help that happened between people. The shelter, it's just remarkable.
Well, there's so much beauty in the process of integrating loss if you look for it. And we're going to pick this back up and talk about how grief, how grief is expressed in dysfunctional families.
Okay. My parents have died, and my caregiving to them was essential for me to feel that I did everything I needed to do. Many people said that they didn't know how I was going to survive after being their caregiver, and the fact is that I survived. There are usually 5 stages of grief, but we know that there is a 6th one, which is giving meaning to our loss. My work with you is giving meaning to their lives and giving meaning to my own grief by guiding other people through the process.
In our next talk, in our next podcast. So how many families would you say are on the spectrum of being dysfunctional, Jackie?
100%.
On that note, we'll say goodbye. And we'll see you guys next time. Thank you, Jackie.
Lee. Thank you, Lee. Bye. Bye-bye.